Okay, so some of you wanted to see how to make your own version of this little birds versus crabs game I made. It's a pretty simple game. Mostly what happens is they create clones and they fly at each other and then they explode on impact. So we're gonna make our own version of that, except it'll be a little simpler because this game has gotten, this one's gotten kind of extensive. So we'll make a simpler version of it. To start out with, you're gonna need to pick the two sprites that you're gonna be cloning. So for this, I'll use the cat. And I'll grab another sprite. How about the hen? That sounds good. And so the problem you're going to have right in the beginning here is that these sprites are actually facing different directions. So we need to turn one of them around. And you might think, well, we can just do that by changing their direction, like doing this. But unfortunately, that also means that they're upside down now. Instead of using the all-round rotate, we can use the left-right rotate, like this. And there we go. They're now facing each other. I'm going to make them both just a little bit smaller, just for appearances, so you have a little more space to work with. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to need a costume for them exploding, because what happens in my game is they move forward, and then once they hit a certain point, they change the costume to that exploding costume, and then they disappear. So to get that costume, we're going to go over to my game, actually. So you can go ahead and open up a new tab and type in scratch.mit.edu, and if you search for Keller Flint, you'll find me. And you can find my birds versus crabs game right here. And if I say see inside, I can go to the costumes for one of these guys, like the birds here. And I can get this little explosion clip. And all I have to do, if you look down at the bottom of your screen, there's this little thing called backpack. So you're going to open that by clicking on it. And it'll open anything in your backpack. It'll probably be empty for you guys. Then all you're going to have to do is just drag that little explosion effect into your backpack. Now, when we go back to our game and open the backpack, we have that explosion costume saved. So we can just add it, drag it right into our sprite that we want. Now I want that explosion effect on both of them, so I'm going to go into the hen and delete all these extra ones and do the same thing, just drag it in. Perfect. You'll also want to center these, so if you click the box tool here and drag a box around this, you want to put this right in the center. See this little thing right here? We want to put it right in the middle of that. Like that. That'll line it up nicely with the sprite. And we want to do the same thing for the cat. Right in the center there. Great. For now, I'll switch them both back to their original costumes. And let's get into the code. First, remember to name your project. So we'll call this one Cats versus Hens. Basically, everything I'm doing here is working with something called a clone. And what a clone is just a copy of one of these sprites that has its own little set of instructions that it follows. So the way we do that is there's this little thing in here called create clone. It's an instruction that says create clone of myself. You can also create clones of other things, but for now, we're going to be creating clones of myself. So on the cat, if I click this button, it creates a clone of him. Now you don't see anything because the clone is actually directly underneath him. They're right on top of each other. But see, now I have two of them. And if I click stop, it'll erase all of my clones. What we need to do here is go into our events. So when we click start, we're going to create a clone. But we're not just going to create one clone. We're going to keep creating clones. So we're going to put a loop in here with forever. And we're going to grab a wait 1 second, because otherwise this is going to create just a ridiculous number of clones. So we'll do like wait 0.25 seconds. We'll see how that goes. We can always come back and adjust this number later. Now, when these start as clone, when I start as clone, there's an option right here in controls that says when I start as clone. Drag that in. And now this is going to tell the clone what to do once it gets created. Because right now, if I click start, we're creating clones every 0.25 seconds, but look, they're not moving anywhere. They're just sitting there doing nothing. That's not what I want. I want them to move towards the hen. So what I can do is click the move 10 steps forward button. If I click start now, once it creates a clone, it'll move 1 step forward, but then they'll just move 1 step forward and stop. What we need is for this move 10 steps forward to repeat a few times. So I'm going to go into controls and choose this repeat 10 loop, and we'll see if that's far enough. Let's go just a little bit farther. Let's go with repeat 12. There we go. I like that. So now what we need to do is once they've finished getting there, once they've gone to the very end, we're going to have them change costume. Switch costume 2, and instead of costume 1 now, we're going to move to our explosion costume. And then I need to delete the sprite, because otherwise they just hang out there and do nothing forever. So we're going to wait for like 0.2 seconds so that we have a chance to actually see the explosion costume before it gets deleted. And then we are going to choose in control, very bottom, delete this clone. Let's review what we have so far. Forever, every 0.25 seconds, we're going to create another clone of the cat, of myself. When that clone is created, it's going to repeat 12 times, moving forward 10 steps until it's right about here. Once it's done with that, it will switch its costume to the explode costume. Then it will wait for a little bit. I have it as 0.2 seconds so that it has time to show the costume before then deleting itself from the game. If I click start, that's what it looks like. Cats walk forward and they explode. You can play with these numbers a little bit. So for instance, maybe I should make this a little bit farther. You could make it a little bit faster too, something like 0.1 instead. Excellent. Now we need to do almost the exact same thing with the hen. So what I'm going to do is copy the code, both pieces, by dragging it over the hen and letting go. And there we have it. Remember, move 10 steps moves it in the direction that it's pointing. So it doesn't have to be negative since the chicken is pointing to the left. That's the basic idea of what we're doing. But I have a little bit more in my game. For one, they don't just walk in straight lines at each other. They sort of curve and turn and go in somewhat random directions. So let's add that part of this game. To do that, we're going to have this thing where when the sprite is created, we don't have it just move forward in a straight line. We also turn it a little bit. So when we start as clone, we'll turn the sprite a few degrees. Now, if you look at this, I can have him turn in all sorts of degrees and just have him face different directions. But what I want to do with this is have him turn just a few degrees up or just a few degrees down, but I want it to happen randomly. So sometimes he goes up a little, sometimes he goes down a little, sometimes he goes straight ahead. Now, the way to do random numbers is to go into operators and choose this pick random button. So if we choose between 0 and 20, for instance, we'll see that he turns right between 0 and 20. So he might go straight or he might go a little bit down, and that changes. If we say negative 20 to 0, he'll go up a little bit or straight even. If we say negative 20 to 20, now we get the kind of effect that I was using, where he could go in a few directions here. We can do the same thing for the chicken. And there you have it. That's a rough approximation of the game that I was making. I also had sound effects, of course. You can always go into sounds. And we'll just use their default sounds, actually. And we will have that every time they explode, we play their sound. So let's go into sounds and choose start sound and put it right here before delete clone. There we go. Sounds good. Now we just have to add the cats. And we have an atrocious sounding mess on our hands. Let's turn that off for a little bit. Don't forget to choose a backdrop. Those are always fun. The last effect I used was the color changing effect on each one of the clones. So anytime a new clone was created, it randomly chose to be a certain color. To do that, go into looks, and if you scroll down, you'll find the effect set color to. We're going to put that right in the beginning after we create the clone. And then we're just going to choose a random number. And we'll set this number to something like 1,000. I actually don't know what the upper number is, but you can basically go as high as you want. There we go. Now the cats are changing colors. And all we need to do is do that exact same piece of code on the hen. Perfect. And there you go. You have a very basic version of my War Never Changes game. You can add music on your own and do anything else you like to it. Have fun coding, and I'll see you guys in the next video.